The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, traveled today to Turkey on an official visit aimed at strengthening relations of brotherhood and cooperation between the two countries. The Third International Conference on the Role of Constitutional Review in Protecting Rights and Freedoms in Algeria and Comparative Systems, held under the high auspices of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, is continuing for the second consecutive day here in Algiers. The League of Arab States has condemned in the strongest possible terms the drone attacks on Tuesday that targeted at least 3 strategic sites in Khartoum state, including the international airport in the Sudanese capital. More than 400 former European ministers, ambassadors and officials in an open letter addressed to the EU leaders called for immediate action to halt the annexation plan being pursued by Israeli occupying authorities in the West Bank. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm your host, Mr. Sharfi. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, traveled today to Turkey on an official visit aimed at strengthening relations of brotherhood and cooperation between the two countries. The President of the Republic will co-chair together with his brother, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the first session of the Algerian-Turkish High-Level Strategic Cooperation Council. The Third International Conference on the Role of Constitutional Review in Protecting Rights and Freedoms in Algeria and Comparative Systems, held under the auspices of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, is continuing for the second consecutive day here in Algiers. More details with Jamal Salmani.
The second-day program, organized by the Constitutional Court in partnership with the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, featured a scientific session on the right of individuals to access constitutional justice, with the participation of presidents and members of constitutional councils, judges, professors, and experts from several countries, including Egypt, Mauritania, Namibia, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Ireland, ahead of the presentation of final recommendations. In a message read by the President of the Constitutional Court, Ms. Leila Aslawi, the President of the Republic stressed that the conference theme aligns with Algeria's comprehensive reform project, where constitutional review is not merely a technical tool, but a sovereign guarantee to strengthen citizens' trust in their laws. He affirmed that Algeria's vision requires an independent and effective constitutional justice to safeguard constitutional supremacy and individual and collective freedoms, adding that hosting this meeting aims to consolidate the rule of law and reinforce the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms. Participants in the conference unanimously praised Algeria's notable progress in constitutional justice following positive and fruitful reforms. The President of the Egyptian Supreme Constitutional Court, Mr. Boulos Iskandar Fahmy, hailed the Algerian Constitutional Court as one of the most important in the Arab world and highlighted strengthened cooperation with Egypt, while the Mauritanian counterpart called for greater regional coordination amid global instability and welcomed the Algerian president's message on strengthening rights protection. Professor Oren Doyley of Dublin University said Algeria's positive and fruitful reforms aim to reinforce rights, freedoms, and access to justice, stressing the need for stronger judicial coordination. The conference, which runs until tomorrow, is organized by the Constitutional Court under the auspices of the President of the Republic in partnership with the UNDP.
The 8th edition of the Algerian Products and Services Fair has opened in Nouakchott, Mauritania, with a record participation of national companies. The opening ceremony, co-chaired by the Algerian ambassador to Mauritania, Mr. Amin Sid, and the Mauritanian Minister of Commerce and Tourism, Ms. Zainoubou Mint Ahmed Han, was described by the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Export Promotion as an exceptional economic event, reflecting the shared will to strengthen economic partnership, with record participation of over 350 companies across key sectors including agri-food, industry, services, technology, tourism, and health. Ms. Mint Ahmed Nah affirmed support for trade and investment initiatives and called on Algerian businesses to seize opportunities in Mauritania's strategic market, stressing that ties with Algeria go beyond trade and reflect a strategic partnership for joint development.
نؤكد استعدادنا لمواكبة كل المبادرات الجادة.
We affirm our readiness to support all serious initiatives aimed at facilitating trade, encouraging investment, and improving the fluidity of goods. I also call on Algerian companies and business leaders to seize the opportunities offered by the Mauritanian market, given its strategic position open to West Africa and the Sahel region, and the promising prospects it provides in the fields of trade, industry, services, tourism, and logistics. What brings Mauritania and Algeria together goes beyond trade exchanges and is deeper than any conventional partnership. It is a strategic choice between two brotherly countries that share history, geography, and ambition, and that are working together to build an integrated economic space that reflects the will of their leaders and serves the aspirations of their peoples for development and investment.
Mr. Sid, for his part, said the 8th edition marks a new step in strengthening economic partnership, reflecting the shared will of President Tebboune and Ghazawani and highlighting Algeria's efforts to boost its African presence through major projects and 29 cooperation agreements in key sectors. He stressed that the event reflects Algeria's strategic drive to strengthen African cooperation through major projects that have boosted trade with Mauritania to over $400 million.
يؤكد هذا الحدث الخيار الاستراتيجي للدولة الجزائرية.
This event confirms the strategic choice of the Algerian state to strengthen its cooperation and partnership with its brothers in the African continent, especially as the country is now contributing to major structural projects of a strategic dimension, such as the Tindouf-Zouirat Road, the Trans-Saharan Highway, and the railway line. All these are, in fact, achievements that have had a positive impact on the volume of trade between the two countries, which has exceeded $400 million in recent years, making Algeria the leading African economic partner of Mauritania.
That was the Algerian ambassador to Mauritania, Mr. Amin Sid. The State Minister of Hydrocarbons, Mohamed Arkab, has received here in Algiers the Egyptian Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, Karim Ibrahim Ali Badawi, with whom he examined ways to strengthen bilateral cooperation relations as well as partnership and investment opportunities. More details with Jamal Salmani.
During the meeting held in the presence of senior officials, both sides reviewed their historic and privileged bilateral relations and discussed ways to strengthen cooperation, particularly in hydrocarbons, while exploring new investment and partnership opportunities. Mr. Arkab affirmed that the event reflects strong Algeria-Egypt cooperation and the leaders' commitment to strengthening Arab-African cooperation and strategic partnerships in the continent.
إن هذا الحدث الهام يندرج في إطار.
This important event is part of the outstanding fraternal cooperation between Algeria and the sister Arab Republic of Egypt and reflects the instructions of the leaders of both countries. It also testifies to our shared commitment to strengthening Arab-African cooperation and promoting strategic alliances among the countries of the continent.
دول القارة.
The two sides welcomed progress in bilateral cooperation, highlighted by the Hasiberke's second phase development contract between Sonatrach and Petrojet, and a memorandum on oil and petroleum products marketing, while stressing broader cooperation, hydrocarbons, technology transfer and training, and agreeing to strengthen coordination and continue consultations with the GECF and OAPC to support market stability. On this occasion, the State Minister invited Egyptian companies to seize investment and partnership opportunities in Algeria, highlighting a more attractive investment climate driven by new reforms, simplified procedures, and the Algeria Bid Round 2026. For his part, Mr. Badawi expressed his satisfaction with the quality of fraternal relations between the two countries, welcoming the dynamic of bilateral cooperation, particularly in the hydrocarbon sector. He said the Petrojet-Arkad partnership on this major project will add value to Algeria and all its partners.
والشراكة مع شركة بتروجيت في تحالف أركاد.
The partnership between the Egyptian company Petrojet and the Italian company Arkad for this large complex will bring added value to Algeria and all our partners.
He also praised the level of consultations between both sides, which have been crowned by the signing of contracts with the Sonatrach Group.
The Minister of Energy and Renewable Energies, Mr. Murad Ajal, has met the European Commissioner for the Mediterranean, Ms. Dubravka Suica, or Suissa, during a working visit to Algeria to discuss ways to strengthen cooperation and partnership, particularly in renewable energy, green hydrogen, and energy efficiency. The talks focused on strengthening Mediterranean energy cooperation, with both sides stressing the need to boost partnerships in renewable energy, green hydrogen, and energy efficiency, and reviving key projects like the Algeria-Italy interconnection and the South 2H or H2 corridor to enhance energy exchanges and reinforce Algeria's role as a reliable supplier. Mr. Ajjar reaffirmed the importance Algeria attaches to these projects as a key basis for fruitful cooperation between the two shores of the Mediterranean. Earlier, the Minister of the Interior, Local Authorities and Transport, Mr. Said Sayoud, received Ms. Suissa and discussed ways to strengthen cooperation and coordination in areas of common interest in the presence of the EU ambassador to Algeria and senior officials. The talks addressed Mediterranean issues of common concern, particularly irregular migration and disaster management, stressing a coordination basis approach, while both sides underlined their determination to continue promoting dialogue and consolidating cooperation mechanisms in support of stronger partnership and coordination. A delegation of Algerian business leaders attending the Select USA Investment Summit, now being held in National Harbor, Maryland, USA, have met with the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Christopher Lando. The talks were held between the Algerian delegation led by Kamal Moula, President of the Council of Algerian Economic Renewal, CREA, and the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Mr. Lando, who welcomed Algeria's participation in the U.S. Investment Summit. Given the size of the delegation, the U.S. official also expressed satisfaction with the results of his recent visit to Algeria, during which he was received by the President of the Republic, Mr. Al-Majid Tebboune, reiterating his commitment to developing Algerian-American cooperation. For its part, the Algerian delegation reviewed the significant investment opportunities in Algeria, particularly in sectors with strong economic potential and high technological content that may be of interest to U.S. investors, such as energy, agriculture, the production of raw materials for the pharmaceutical industry, modern technologies, and mining under the new law governing this sector. The Algerian delegation also expressed its hope that U.S. companies would diversify their investment and participate in the major infrastructure projects currently underway in Algeria. On the third day of its visit to the United States, Algerian delegation also met with the governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, in the presence of several senior officials from the state. The United Nations team in Sudan has reported that flights to and from the capital Khartoum remain suspended following drone attacks that targeted the airport and other parts of the city. The airport is vital for the delivery of humanitarian aid, particularly for the movement of aid workers. The UN team is reported to have returned to Khartoum to continue its work after having redeployed to Port Sudan in the east of the country due to the ongoing armed conflict in the country. UN spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric condemned these attacks, which affected civilians and civilian infrastructure.
That airport is vital to humanitarian access, particularly for the movement of humanitarian personnel. And as you'll recall, our UN team has resettled in Khartoum. We condemn these attacks impacting civilians and civilian infrastructure and call on the parties to abide by their obligations under international humanitarian law, which prohibits attacks directed at civilians and civilian objects. A day after a fuel station and a tanker were hit near Kosti in White Nile State, drones today reportedly struck several places in the city, including 2 fuel stations in busy areas. There were reports of casualties, and basic services as a result were disrupted.
The League of Arab States has condemned in the strongest possible terms the drone attacks on Tuesday that targeted at least 3 strategic sites in Khartoum state, including the international airport in the Sudanese capital. More details with Jamal Salmani.
In a statement, the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abul Ghait, stated that the targeting of civilians' facilities. In a statement, the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abul Ghait, stated that the targeting of civilian facilities and vital infrastructure this time from bases located outside Sudanese territory, constitutes a dangerous escalation and a threat to regional peace and security, further exacerbating the humanitarian and security situation in Sudan. He warned against such actions regardless of their source, stressing that they aim to widen the scope of the conflict and undermine Arab, African and international efforts towards appeasement and de-escalation, as well as the creation of conditions conducive to an inclusive Sudanese civil dialogue designed to preserve the sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity of the country and to meet the aspirations of its people for security, peace and stability. Furthermore, the League of Arab States has reaffirmed its full support for Sudan in safeguarding its security, sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity, as well as protecting its infrastructure and national institutions, calling on all parties to refrain from any action or stance that might hinder regional and international efforts to achieve a ceasefire, reviving the Jeddah process and launching an inclusive national civil dialogue. On Tuesday, the Sudanese government announced the United Arab Emirates' involvement in the drone attacks launched the previous day against Khartoum International Airport, attributed to the rapid support paramilitary forces which have been in conflict with the Sudanese army since April 2023.
Now in Lebanon, where 4 Lebanese citizens were killed today following airstrikes carried out by Zionist military fighter jets on areas of southern Lebanon in a continuing violation of the ceasefire in force in the country, the national news agency ANI reported. ANI stated that 2 citizens were killed during a bombing carried out by Zionist drone targeting the town of Mefdoun, whilst 2 further deaths were recorded following a Zionist raid targeting the home of the head of the municipal council in the town of Zalaya in the western Bekaa region. Warplanes also launched a series of raids targeting the river valley between the towns of Zawtar al-Sharqiyya and Zawtar al-Gharbiyya. More than 400 former European ministers, ambassadors and officials, in an open letter addressed to the EU leaders, called for immediate action to halt the annexation plan being pursued by the Israeli occupying authorities in the West Bank through the settlement project known as E1, which plans to construct thousands of settlement units. More details in this report with Jamal Silmani.
The German press agency said that the letter was signed by 448 prominent European figures, including former Vice President of the European Commission, Josep Borrell, and former Belgian Prime Minister. The signatories stressed that the European Union and its member states, in coordination with their partners, are required to take urgent steps to deter the occupier from continuing its illegal annexation of Palestinian territory in the West Bank. The Israeli occupying authorities approved the E1 settlement project in August 2025. This project is expected to divide the West Bank into 2 separate parts, posing a direct threat to the territorial contiguity of any future Palestinian state. In a related development in December of the same year, the occupier issued a tender for the construction of approximately 3,400 settlement units on an area estimated at 12 square kilometers east of Jerusalem. The signatories emphasized that it intends to issue detailed tenders for the development of the area covered by the project on the 1st of June, calling on the European Union to take swift action, particularly during the Foreign Affairs Council meeting scheduled for next Monday. At a minimum, the signatories demanded targeted sanctions, including visa bans on all individuals involved in settlement activity and preventing them from engaging in business activities within the European Union, especially those who support or participate in the tenders or implement the E1 settlement plan. The pace of settlement expansion has accelerated significantly under the current Zionist cabinet, which has approved the construction of 54 settlements by 2025, a record number according to the Peace Now organization. Since taking office in 2022, it has also approved more than 100 settlements.
You have been listening to Radio Algeria International. Stay tuned.